So today I want to talk about product strategy, about Figma, and about how successful companies and successful product managers can latch on to larger trends that are in the industry to build really successful long-term approaches to solve real problems for people. And we're going to make it specific because, like, who really has the time to do this generally? We're going to talk about Figma. And we're specifically going to talk about the motion that Figma had from getting started as a company all the way through to their most recent release, which is Slides. And Slides is a wonderful example of how you can build a capstone product on top of an existing strategy if you've been diligently working at this for a long time. Now, the best strategies are strategies that capture megatrends that affect all of us for years in advance. And so you might wonder, what did Figma do, right? Like, where's their strategy? Well, the truth is, Figma figured out earlier than most people that software was going to become collaborative. One of the defining characteristics of software in the 1990s, software in the 2000s, was that it was an individual activity that you did at your computer. At the beginning, you would literally go and you would get software on disk and you would put it on your machine and you would compute on the machine. Now, we're not really talking about computing as like a cloud service, right? That's a whole separate conversation. We'll do a separate YouTube video on that. We're talking about computing as an activity designed to produce economic output for a worker, which sounds really dry, but at the end of the day, fundamentally, most productivity software for businesses is built around the idea of, can it make you more efficient at your job? That's what companies like Asana pitch all the time. So with Figma, what they figured out, their core insight, what they believed was true 5-10 years in the future when they got started, was that software was going to move from being this individual activity to being something that we all work on together. And they picked design as the way to do that because design is one of the more collaborative job families. How many times, if you work in engineering, if you work in product, if you work in marketing, have you been talking with a designer about the way something is framed or structured or designed so that it affects the customer in the right way, so the customer can get their job done more efficiently, whatever it is? It is a collaborative art. It is easier to be collaborative if you can all be in the tool together, see what you each are doing, if you have canvas or space to comment and talk. And frankly, Adobe was late to the game on that. Adobe was not investing in that with their Sketch product. They viewed productivity in the old 1990s way as, let's just get this on disk, let's get this downloaded, let's get this worker a seat that we can monetize, and off we go. So if you're Figma, that's a massive opportunity, right? But there's a huge technical challenge, which, by the way, is a reason to start a business, not to stop it. Because at the end of the day, if you are solving a big technical challenge, you're fundamentally making a difficult promise come true for customers. And that is hard to beat if you can do it, if you can get it right. Now, Figma's was really hard because they basically had to take software that everyone had assumed you could write on a computer program that you can use your whole computer to employ and work against, and they had to put it all in a little light browser, which is a much smaller envelope for your application. And they did. It just took a long time. And so when we talk about sort of the saga of Silicon Valley companies, which ones have started quickly, which ones have not, Figma's a slow one. Figma took a long time to really get going, 4 or 5 years, I think. And one of the reasons why is because they had to solve a whole bunch of complicated technical problems to get into the browser and have a smooth collaborative experience in order to take advantage of that mega trend. Now, I want you to think about something. If you are solving a hard challenge, but you're not solving in the direction of a larger trend, what's going to happen in 4 or 5 years when you've solved it? You're going to be off trend. And so it's so important to understand, where is the trend going over the long term, and how can you be in front of it? And in a sense, startups are about seeing the future a little bit more accurately than everybody else. And in this case, for the specific kind of work, Figma saw the future more accurately. They saw that people were going to want to collaborate. They'd be hungry for it if they could deliver the product. So when they finally did, 4 or 5 years later, people latched onto it. I remember when every design director I knew was getting Figma installed at their workplace and rolling Adobe back out. And I think that's part of why, a few years later, Adobe tried to acquire Figma, because they saw that they kind of missed the boat. They missed the boat on collaborative software, and they needed to spend some of the cash that they had on hand to change that and get back in the game. And that's how larger companies often do it. Like if they miss the boat on a particular trend, they'll try and buy their way out. So let's get back to Figma. At the end of the day, when you have this core product you've launched, they have Figma, they launch it, it's collaborative, it starts to take off. The natural thing to do is to add more features to that product when people tell you to add them, right? You talk to your customer, your product manager now talks to the customer, they add a feature, it's a little widget, the widget goes in Figma, the product manager takes their hat off and says, job well done, everybody, great job. That's a path to feature bloat. That's a path to unhealthy product long-term, regardless of the micro results. What you need to do is understand what are the things that your customers are saying about adjacent problem spaces that you can solve using a similar approach. So yes, you do need to listen to your customers, but don't listen to them if what they're telling you to do is going to make your product more complicated to use or only available to super users. Listen to it if it's going to enable you to solve meaningful problems for them across more and more workflows. So in this case, with the slides release, just fast forwarding to the present, and there's other ones we could talk about that Figma has done. I'm just using slides as an example because it's recent. At the end of the day, what they realized is that designers were already using Figma. And not just for design. They were already using Figma for presentations. But it wasn't clean. It wasn't easy to do. Other people couldn't get in there and use it as a slide creator really easily. So they decided to change that. And it was a leapfrog motion for them because the thing that they are now worried about getting disrupted by is, of course, AI. And so they needed to find a way to start to compete in the AI space as well. And what better way to do that than by getting AI, which is deeply informed by text because we have so many large language models now. And that's like the heart of the movement. I know there's a big image generation movement, and I know that's a factor in design. They went all in on large language models, I think, partly because those are so influential right now for business products. That being said, they go in on slides. And what they realize is that they have an opportunity to level up the actual core presentation experience. Yes, customers are asking for slides by their behavior. They're basically saying, I use this for presentations, and Figma noticed. But what they probably didn't say clearly, because I've done a lot of customer interviews and they almost never say this clearly, is please can I have an AI-powered applet called Slides where I can actually show my clickable demos as if it was a slide presentation. That's what they built. Almost never do your customers ask that clearly. That was up to the imagination of the product and design teams and the engineering team at Figma to figure out from what the customers were doing in presenting those slides and to say, how can we take this and tie it back to this larger trend, this larger strategy where we're working on collaborative software? And how can we continue to build on that into more workflows? This slide or presentation workflow is a new one for them. People were using their software for it, but it was kind of a hacky use case. So if they wanted to build it right, they had to understand that workflow and they had to apply Figma's knowledge of how to do collaborative software to that new workflow. That's really the heart of what makes slides tick. And that's why I think it's a great example of how you start to build on a trend over time. Because now slides is out and all of a sudden people are able to interact with this PowerPoint presentation beyond the canvas. And so just like we are now thinking about design as a fundamentally collaborative exercise, Figma is inviting us to think about presentations as a fundamentally collaborative exercise. And yes, designers will probably be the ones that use this most often initially. But the idea of having strong collaborative activity is something that Figma is really good at, and that they are extending into more workflows. And I think that we as product managers, we in tech often don't have that degree of consistency of vision. We don't start out years and years ago building something for a future we think is possible around a megatrend, consistently solve a hard technical problem, finally get something done that many people thought was impossible, by the way. Getting Figma into the browser, people thought that wasn't going to get done. And then keep building on that, right? Like, we don't just build bloatware after that, like keep relentlessly building on the core value that we have discovered, that people like to collaborate. They need to collaborate, and that accelerates value. So I'm not a Figma person. I don't work at Figma. I don't have Figma stock or anything like that. I just think this is a wonderful case study for people who study product strategy. And I wanted to kind of take it and open it up. I've done a shorter version of this on my TikTok, but I thought this would be a good place to sort of have a longer form discussion. I hope you enjoyed it.